I'm John, and this is my wife Erin, and we're urban homesteaders and organic gardeners based in the Pacific Northwest. One of the first things we did the first summer we were here is we visited a lot of our local lavender farms, and we were able to get to know the farmers and the people that run those farms.
We consume so much lavender here in our country, hundreds of thousands of pounds of it, mainly in its essential oil form, and it's usually imported in massive amounts and not always sustainably. So as we were getting to know the lavender farmers here, we were moved to try to inspire people to become a little bit more involved in the process of using lavender, whether that be by growing it and distilling it at home, or even just supporting local and smaller farms. We decided that one of the best ways to do that would probably be a video. So we decided to make this documentary about lavender, and in it you'll get to meet our local Southern Oregon lavender farmers and learn from them about how they got their farm started and all of their tips and tricks for growing, harvesting, distilling, processing lavender. And we hope that it inspires you to plant some lavender on your property, maybe even start a farm, and at the very least to come visit our lavender farms or your local lavender farms and support smaller farms around the country.
So let's meet the lavender farmers of Southern Oregon.
Well, I'm Sue Owen, and we, together with Derek, we run the English Lavender Farm in Applegate. We started with the premise that Derek was spending way too much money on his soap that he was just giving away, and he was making it with essential oil. And I said, well, surely we should be able to make our own essential oil, you know?
Yeah, how hard can it be? Come on, a couple of plants.
So we were visiting farms in the south of France when we were on holiday there. And the people were really nice and took time to explain how they distilled essential oil. And they had some enormous stills, huge things. And some of them were on wagons where they would take them to farms and distill for other people. Anyway, we spent a lot of time and it was really, really interesting, but it was just a vacation thing. We were just finding out information. And then when we came back, we went and visited some English lavender farms, and slowly we sort of developed a bit more of an interest in it and started reading more. And then when we were discussing what to do after we sold our business, one of the many things that Derek came up with.
I had some really good ideas, I'd like to say.
One of them was maybe we should grow lavender. He was making soap at the time and using an inordinate amount of essential oil, which was costing a fortune. And I said, well, why can't we just make our own essential oil? And of course we started to look into how we would do that, and here we are.
We were also beekeepers, and the two seemed to work very well together. I realise we're a monocrop farm, but it's much easier to fill in the times when there is less for them to feed on. So it really worked well with everything that we wanted to do. I have to say, I had no idea farming was so hard. I know that's a joke, but it's so much physical labour. It's not just tending the fields, it's so many other things. Lavender makes it easy because people are very excited by lavender farms. By and large, people come here because they really want to stand in a big field of lavender. And there's something quite magical about it. It's not just the colour, it's also the bees, the environment.
The idea sort of grew. Now we have a whole farm making essential oil. But we have plenty to use in the soap, so we achieved that.
We're Jim and Dottie Becker. We own and are the founders of Goodwin Creek Gardens here in Southern Oregon. Both of us, our backgrounds have always been interested in plants. Jim actually went to university and was trained. Mine is just a love for plants. And we started out, believe it or not, in San Francisco in a friend's backyard. From there, it grew to where we had to get out of San Francisco. The backyard just wasn't big enough. And we got on the road. I think we said we'd go to Canada. But anyway, from San Francisco to wherever, till we found a spot. And we decided, it had looked so beautiful down in this area. Let's go back and just look. And we came into the Applegate, and we just said, this is very special. And so the first person that we saw out on the road as we came in, we stopped and we said, we're going to look for a place. Do you know? And they basically told us that there'd be 10 feet of snow no matter what happened. You're not going to be able to make it. And they were so discouraging. But we did run into somebody also the same day who said that he had a friend that had a mining claim here in Williams, and he's planning to leave, so you might go check it out, which we did, and we took the mining claim and became miners of soapstone. And we had our garden. We planted our garden there. Any case, BLM, when found out that we were living up there, said, are you mining for gold? Or, I mean, you can't be just hanging out there. And we said, oh, no, we're looking for gold. So it got very complicated, and they actually Jim took the case on. We went to court because we said, we're actually miners. Well, Jim went to court with his little briefcase, and they said, well, I can't remember there. Oh, he said, quick like bunnies, get off the property. That was like a BLM lawyer. And so, quick like bunnies, we did find a place here in Williams. And we've always been growing, and it kind of just mushroomed on us that we started out as dried flower growers, worked our way into herbs, and always adding different lavenders. It probably escalated after about the 5th year or so that we realized we were really collecting a lot of lavenders, and then we went on a search and we ended up growing, at this point, 80, 90 varieties of lavender. So it became our focus. I mean, we still grow many other things. The pollinator plants are really important, but the lavenders became the focus probably 10, 15 years ago, maybe even more than that. So that's kind of the beginning of Goodwin Creek Gardens.
And we came across the property that we were on for about 25 years before we came to this place. And here we are, ready to retire 40 years later.
The Lavender Garden here at the Oregon State University was started in 2002 in its planting stage, and then in the spring of 2003 the plants came from the Goodwin Creek Gardens out in Williams, and the Beckers, Jim and Dottie Becker, and Ellen and Jim Scannell, and others showed up here, as they tell me, in a rainstorm in which the plants in the original form were literally mudded in to begin the gardens in the spring of 2003. I came to the Master Gardener program through the classes and signed up to come to the Lavender Garden as an intern, and this is my 9th year, and I just never left the garden. I just kind of adopted it, and now I serve as head gardener of the garden. Right now, there are about, depending on whose calculations, about 250, about 100 to 200 different varieties. There's about 250 plants in here, multiple plants in multiple locations to see how they fit into an environment, or to give it, since this is a demonstration garden, to give people an idea of how that plant will fit amongst their lavenders in their lavender garden.
Welcome to Lavender Fields Forever. I'm John Rinaldi, my wife Bonnie. We started this farm in 2010. We were really, I don't think anybody ever starts off saying, my life's ambition is to be a lavender farmer. We're really, it's just something that just happens, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to have happen. We started by, years ago we would go to blueberry farms, and you pick farms, you put 2 in the bucket, 1 in your mouth, and maybe 2 in the mouth and 1 in the bucket. It's a lot of fun, and we thought eventually if we had the opportunity we wanted to do a blueberry farm. That would be a you-pick blueberry farm. We wanted to share in the experience of that with other people. And we hunted around Southern Oregon for probably 3 or more years looking for a farm that would be suitable for that. But the climate here, it's great. You can grow blueberries, but not really that effectively commercially. It's just a little too hot and dry. So, it's more in the northern part of the state is ideal for that. So we're looking around, we found this place and said, oh my gosh, this has the setting we want. This is perfect. And it has great soil, has ample amount of water. It was just perfect. It also had a lot of deer, because we were walking around when being shown the property, tons of deer walking through. And of course, all the, the variety of birds, and had lots of moles and gophers. And I got to talking with Bonnie, and we said, this is ideal for, a piece of property, but, I didn't want to try and do a crop that would, we'd have to be kind of like battling those elements all the time. So we kind of put our thinking caps on and said, what would be really good is lavender, because it likes the heat. It's an ideal setting for it. It is not eaten or browsed by deer. Rabbits or moles and gophers don't eat it. Birds don't bother it. So that seemed like just the ideal thing to do. And with my background in agriculture, my degree, I could learn how to grow lavender commercially pretty easily. So we did that. We planted in 2010 and grew the farm up for 2 years. Opened in 2012 was it?
2013. We planted in 2011.
And we opened in 2013 to the public, but after growing it up for 2 years, so we could generate some oil to use in our products and to learn how just to grow lavender effectively. And ever since then, so we've been open to the public in the summers, just from mid-June to mid-August, for people to come you-pick and enjoy the farm store. Our whole purpose in this has been to provide an experience. And our goal has always been to make sure people have a great time when they come out to the farm. And we've had a phenomenal amount of experiences of people having great times, life-changing events even. It's just fun to watch people, enjoy their lives out here. We've had 2 summers ago, we had a lady who proposed to her boyfriend and he said yes. But those kind of events that occur in there.
So I'm a clinical aromatherapist, and our company focuses on the healthcare industry, so hospitals, a healthcare practitioner, hospices, how to help them design a program and implement it, right? Policies, procedures, and educate staff. And so I also teach education, as John spoke earlier, as an experience is a big part of what I think is important in general. And so in one of the classes that I had taught about 3 or 4 years ago, Bonnie took the class. And after class, she said, I'd like to talk to you. My husband and I have a lavender farm, and we are going to start distilling this year. And I got so excited, I think I probably literally almost jumped up and down, because at that time I was doing a distillation class just so I could using a top of the stove distiller, showing people how much plant product it takes and what the process of, distillation of a plant to gather essential oils is really all about. So we started collaborating in the summertime with classes. So yeah, not only was it fun from an educational point of view, but they're great people, so we became great friends. So when they decided to move on to the next project, actually I think it was really Bob that went, that would be so cool. So here we are.
Yeah, we definitely have loved working with the plants, and the essential oil has been really fun to learn about, but the best part of all of it has been the people that have come out and the experiences that they've had here, and it's really a blessing to be able to provide that for folks.
Well, we like to say that we never get a crabby person that comes to the lavender farm. Everybody that comes to visit, whether they just want to walk through the fields, or actually cut some, or just sit and chat. They're just in a lovely space.
To be honest, I hadn't had a lot of experience with lavender or essential oils, anything of that nature, actually, till I met Karen. So my exposure is probably about 3 years at this point. And it's just, I love it's, for the properties that you spoke of, it's, if you cut yourself, it's great for helping with that, bee stings. And it's just extremely calming, which is a good thing for me.
Probably if you're going to have only one essential oil, in your house, or you have to take one on a desert island with you, I would say take lavender for the many beneficial properties it offers, both, physical and emotional. And from a growing piece, John spoke so clearly about here in Southern Oregon, it is a great a plant. It's in its natural, happy place. So it's really easy to be just stewards of, planting a little plug of lavender and letting it do its thing and just gently tending to it.
And I would say that's one of the surprising things for me was seeing just the demographic of people that came out here. It was really young families with small kids that would just run around in the lavender and go play on the swing under the maple tree, or it was older couples and they'd just been exposed to and fallen in love with lavender years ago, and the fact that there's a facility like this, a farm like this, close by, just makes people so incredibly happy. So yeah, I think that was surprising to me. I kind of figured it would be more of just an older crowd, and but to see young families out here, it's really enjoying themselves, and how people are really in love with lavender. I mean, they're very passionate about it.
I think the thing that's probably surprised me was I knew people would enjoy the farm, and I knew they would come, because I was familiar. But the enthusiasm and here they are, like before you open and after you're ready to close. So that stream of, like the movie, just build it and they will come, I think I've been quite amazed on for the whole season, even before we opened. It's like, wow. So I think I was a little unprepared for the amount of people and the consistency, but that's been a thrill.
I think lavender makes people feel better. It's a very soothing, relaxing scent, and people use it a lot. It's one of the essential oils that people use the most of, I think. It helps their children to sleep. It helps them to relax after a busy day. But it's used in first aid and all kinds of things that people use on a regular basis, so they're very familiar with it.
Well, for me at least, it was the fragrance of the plant that was most enticing.
I like some of the colored, the white ones. Those are pretty special. The pink ones. Some are darker than others. In fact, there's one we named after our granddaughter that we feel is the darkest of the pinks. We have one that's a red, Q red, which is really a red. It's not pale red, it's bright red.
In general, people want the darkest purple, the longest growing season, yeah, the nicest foliage, and the sweetest scent.
Lavender is just so much fun because it's not only a beautiful flower, but great essential oil, and not only good for healing, but good for skin care and good aromatherapy for calming. And it's a plant that gives in so many ways. And there's just so much. It gives you so many avenues to learn, like the culinary uses and so forth. It's probably about endless, and so that's been a really fun part of this experience.
During the lavender blooming season, we offer a U-pick facility, so people can come out and pick their own bundle of lavender to take home and dry. We have craft sessions, so people can make wreaths and they can learn to make a lavender wand to scent their drawers. We have lavender ice cream for sale and lavender lemonade, and people sit and enjoy the beauty of the lavender and enjoy the goodies that we make as well. We make a very wide range of products with the lavender, some with the lavender oil that we distill here on the farm, and some with the lavender bud. So with the lavender oil, we'll make candles and soap and lotions, creams. And then with the lavender bud, we'll make pillows and sachets, things to help people relax and enjoy the smell of lavender when they're at home. So we have lavender wreath making classes here the weekends in the summer, and we make those with fresh lavender, and we either go out and pick the lavender for people to do it, or they can go and select their own and then build their own wreath. And I've not yet seen one that came out poorly. They look really professional, and they're really straightforward to do if you just know a few simple techniques. So we teach those. They take about an hour and a half, and we run several classes during the summer.
Also for our farm, part of our focus is education. And so we put on at least about 6 classes, 6 different sessions of classes each season to introduce people to lavender. With my background in botany and horticulture, they obviously get a good dose of all that, and as well as how to grow it, a little bit of information on how to propagate it, its uses, and then we do a group harvest and a group distillation, which we have found people just really, really enjoy, get a lot out of that, and they go home with or they leave with a small bottle of essential oil that they themselves created, and a nice spray bottle of hydrosol as well. So that has also been what really has kept the farm, we think, very attractive to people. Is all these events and all the activities we have going on here.
They have the opportunity to do a U-pick if they'd like to come and pick. We have lots of people who just love to come and take photographs. It's great to see families. Because as John explained, John and Bonnie designed it so that the space between the lavender plants is people friendly. The kids will sit down in the grass and they'll play, they'll watch the bees. We make over 40 products, about 40 products, so they love to buy products that have lavender in it. And again, they're pretty wowed and in awe of actually watching a distillation. So we have lots of classes that go on. And then actually just cutting lavender and using it and making wreaths. Bonnie is incredibly creative and does, beautiful wreaths. And so actually having people to, spend 3-4 hours and, making a wreath from the they've cut it themselves. They've trimmed it and designed it. So it's that experience in a really peaceful, serene setting.
So while we were getting going, we were at an herb conference in Williams, and overheard somebody speaking, saying they're starting a lavender farm. And I thought, well, my goodness, I wonder what we should do about that. Are they competitors? Are they friends? What we should work together. Why don't And so, even though you might be inclined to be protective about what you're doing, I said, you know what? I went over to her and said, we're starting a lavender farm. I overheard you saying that. And she says, you know what, and I know somebody else who's starting a lavender farm. And so Bonnie and I looked at each other and go, oh my gosh, there's like 3 or 4 of us now. What's going on here? And so we talked about it a little bit, and we decided that what we would want to do is, see if everybody wants to get together and see what we can do together to kind of, co-market, co-brand, and help support one another in the Applegate Valley here. So we got in touch with all of them. Had them all come over to the house one afternoon and said, well, lavender farmers, what do you want to do? There's some things we want to do together. And we just kind of brainstormed. And that was the birth of, and they all said, yes, we'd love to work together. We can, a rising tide floats all ships kind of an attitude was going on there. So we came up with a name. We called it the Southern Oregon Lavender Trail.
First it was the Southern Oregon Lavender Loop, because we looped around to Goodwin Creek out in Williams and a couple other farms in Williams, and then Thompson Creek Road, and then us. But then then we changed it to Southern Oregon Lavender Trail in deference to our English lavender farm friends who were real familiar with SAULT, S-A-U-L-T, Big Lavender Region in France. This was just a little play on that with S-O-L-T, Southern Oregon Lavender Trail. So they liked that idea. It worked good for us. It worked well, especially because we weren't technically a loop anyway. But our name changed within the first year.
Right, it became the Southern Oregon Lavender Trail.
Yeah, we were really very fortunate that the first years that we were planning to be open, we had a group of others that were planning to be open. And the hardest part is when you're wanting to attract visitors to your place is to get that marketing out there. So here we had partners in marketing, and we felt very, very fortunate in that. So there were, I think, 6 of us that first year, and everybody had different ideas, but they were all very creative and collaborative. And so Those first couple years, the first thing we did was say we're going to market each other, if nothing else. And we even created a little passport system that encouraged people to get to every single farm. If they got to every single farm, they got entered into a drawing to win a big basket of lavender products. But it was to just help get people familiar and get them, make sure they went to every last farm, or at least encourage them to. And from there, we had the opportunity also to experiment a little bit with, since we had a collective budget. One year we tried to see if marketing through Shakespeare outlets was helpful. Another year it was Brit outlets. And by that time, word of mouth, which is always your best advertising, had overtaken everything else, and we needed none of those others. But we spent a lot of time each having different assignments, reaching out to the media and reaching out to the communities of Grants Pass, Medford, Ashland, Jacksonville, and the Applegate to just be known. And after a couple, 3 years, we were known, and we were known as a good, fun experience for the family, and that was a real benefit to being a trail.
It was. It's been a great experience. The Lavender Trail has been wonderful. As part of that, we started off at having events. We found is really the number one thing to get people out to visit your farm. And so we created a festival, a Lavender Festival weekend. For 3 days, you visit all the farms, and each one has different things going on, and food vendors, artisans and craftspeople, activities, like making lavender wands or lavender wreaths and various activities. And that really drew people out as well to those events. So a couple years ago, we said, well, that was fun. Let's do 2 a season. And that has also blossomed really well. And so people that can't make it on one weekend can come on another weekend, and that's been very helpful too.
We found too that any one of us as an individual business had a hard time getting the attention of the media because they didn't want to promote a singular business. But a trail, a collective, they were absolutely eager to do. And so we hadn't really anticipated that benefit before we started, but it was probably our biggest benefit. Plus, as you're just starting out, it's good to have other people to bounce ideas off of. We got a lot of great information from the Oregon Lavender Association and the other lavender farmers there. But then here we had people with local experience that were having the same weather we were having and the same other conditions we were having. So we were able to share and learn from each other, as well as having all that marketing benefit. And and when you're starting and you have a lot of weird problems that have nothing to do with farming, it's good to have somebody else to commiserate with.
Besides me?
Yeah.
Exactly. So when we were starting the farm, had to decide, number one, what lavender varieties do we want to grow? There's 300 or 400 different varieties, and probably of those, maybe a couple hundred of them are suitable to our environment. So we had to, number one, identify which varieties that we wanted to grow. And that, and in order to look at that, you kind of had to decide what you want to do with the lavender. If you're just going to distill it for essential oils, you may just want to grow, a certain variety that's going to produce the oil you want. If it's in quantity, a nice amount of oil, you want to maybe grow the Grosso variety, which is the #1 oil producer in the world. There's other varieties that have, that generate a great amount of oil too, but they have different aromatic profiles, and so it kind of depends on what you want to go for. And so we selected 7 different varieties that have, some have culinary applications, some are just are more decorative, for wreaths and floral arrangements and whatnot. And of course, we have a good portion of our field dedicated to oil producing, because that's what we need in order to make the products that we produce.
People often, when they buy lavender, say, how much can I water this? You can water it absolutely every day, as long as the water's gone after you've finished watering. In our soil with a little clay in it, we really can't water very often. So our lavender definitely struggles, and I believe lavender is a bit like grapes. You get a better product if it struggles towards harvest time. So early in the year, it has plenty of water here. We get a lot of rain up here early in the year. And as the rain goes away, we do supplement the water, but we're talking every few weeks. It will get a quarter to half a gallon at most. So it's It's very economical on water. It's a good drought-tolerant plant.
And then Dottie, probably 20 years ago, I guess, or more, found this little tiny seedling, maybe a half an inch tall, in the pot of a very large old French lavender, the dentata, which is another non-hardy, cold-hardy variety. And so I would have just weeded that one out, thinking it doesn't look anything different. But Dottie said, no, save that one. It's really unique. And it's the one that turned out to be Goodwin Creek Gray. And it was unique in a lot of ways. Most varieties of lavender don't bloom in this all winter, and most of them only bloom for a few weeks in the summer. So when we found this one, it was unique in that it bloomed 12 months of the year if it got enough light. For instance, Southern California, Texas, Florida, you could get it to bloom 12 months of the year. That's pretty unique.
I like a variety of early bloomers and late bloomers so that there is a continuation throughout the summer. Early bloomers will come and maybe fade away by midsummer. The late bloomers will come in about midsummer and then go on. Your stoicas varieties, which looks like little bunny tails and bunny ears sticking up. This year they came in very early, and they always come in very early. And this year we've got one variety in particular that we pruned early, and now it's almost in full bloom again a second time.
So today we're going to harvest some lavender. We're standing in the part of the field that has our gross blue lavender. A little further down the field in that direction are our culinary lavenders. They tend to come to harvest much earlier than our gross blue, which are our bigger oil producing lavenders. We want to leave those in the growing season much longer because they're producing our oils for us. The culinary lavenders, however, come to harvest much earlier because we want to get them harvested when they're still young. So when there's maybe just 25% of it has started to flower, so that we'll get them when there's no bitterness. They're nice, still, and sweet. But today we're going to just harvest some of our gross blue here, and we also have the Hidcote Giant, which is more of an aromatic lavender, and we'll harvest that, but we do different things with it. This we're going to distill into essential oil and hydrosol water. Our Hidcote Giant we're going to harvest, put it in big bundles in our basket, in our wagon, and then we're going to take it inside and let it hang it and dry it, and then put it through a stripping process to strip the buds off, and then through a cleaning process, like a seed cleaning process, to just end up with the beautiful buds. But they will be for our aromatic purposes, for filling little sachets and eye pouches and things of that nature. This is a bigger oil producing one. We're going to harvest this one and distill it. So the actual harvesting process is pretty simple. We're going to use this wagon. Because this is going to go through the distillation process, when we put it in the basket, we're going to try and keep it as organized as possible. So all the flower tips are going to stay on one side. It's really important on the other end when you start trying to cut the flower tops off. If you just throw everything in the basket, it's very disorganized, and it probably adds 100% to the time process of trying to cut the flowers off later. So when we cut it, we're going to cut it, and then we're going to stack it in here in a very organized fashion, keep all the flower tips as close to one side of the basket as possible. And then we're just going to layer it up. So as we go through, typically to get one distillation, we're looking at harvesting about 12 plants. And depending on the size of them, and Grosso might only take 10 because it's a bigger, more robust plant. This is a little smaller, the buds are smaller, so we're probably looking at about 12 full plants that we're going to harvest, put in this basket, in this wagon, and then take it inside and start the distillation process. So the actual way that we harvest it is we use a hand sickle, a beautifully designed little weapon, actually a nice little tool. It has this lovely little end piece to it, so it holds your hand right in place. And when we harvest, what we're going to do is basically just grab, we want to take, we want to leave a nice stalk so that we have something to work with when we're inside cutting the flower tops off. So what I typically like to do is I'll put the sickle in, and then I'll just lay the stalks over top of it, and then I always use a cutting motion, a quick one that is away from me, okay? And then we end up with a lovely little bunch, and I'm going to put it in the basket and make sure all the flower tops are organized at the one end. And then I'll just go around this entire plant and just harvest it. Or I might just go down one side of the row and then go do the other side of the row later. So it's a pretty simple process. I just put the sickle in, a quick cutting motion, and we end up with a beautiful little bunch with the flowers nicely organized.
Pass these out. You want to harvest? These are hand sickles. They're very, very sharp. So this row here, as you can see, is Grosso, and this row here is Gross Blue. With one of your hands, grab some buds here of Grosso and give it a crush, give it a smell, and with the other hand, do it on, well, you have to back up here a ways, come up here and get some Gross Blue. I want you to check out the different aromas, see what you think, what you like.
How many bunches of lavender fit in your still? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 51 bunches. In my opinion, the secret of good distillation is getting the pack right for the material you're distilling. I think that's very different for each person's material and for each person's still. And I've been doing this for 4 years, and I'm nearly right. I'm nearly okay every time. So it's a bit of a trial and error thing. We take the lavender that we've harvested, and usually when we're cutting for the still, we'll pick up larger bunches because it really doesn't matter. They're only in a bunch for a few minutes while we bring them down out of the field. As all of the oil is in the bud, we really don't need to worry about this green material at the bottom. It's going to take up room. It's going to lower the amount of oil we can produce out of each run. So we cut and take the flowers, leaving us with a bunch of green. There are some buds still in there, and these are then recycled. We send them to a neighbor who has chickens, and her chickens work through and eat all of the buds out of each of these bunches. I've already filled the still up to the waterline. The waterline is about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch below where this basket will sit. The idea is we get the water hot and we want steam flowing up through the lavender. The steam is hotter than the flash point of the lavender oil, so as the steam meets the lavender, it carries out the oil up through the top and down into this condenser. The condenser is a separate circuit, so it has cold water running through it, and the distillate, as it condenses coming down through, will go into this glass device called an essencier, and this will separate oil and water. So we'll get a steady flow of water out one side, oil out the other side. It's a very simple process. In our case, it lasts about 6 hours. Many stills will be able to accomplish the same thing in a couple of hours because they're smaller and they have more aggressive heat sources. Here we're running electric, so it takes about 1 hour and 20 minutes for the water to boil, and we're already at that point right now. It's a very simple, slow process. So right now I have boiling water to this point, and about 1/2 an inch above that is the main stainless steel basket holding the lavender. The water is turning to steam because it's boiling. That's coming up through the lavender, bringing the lavender to the temperature of the steam slowly. The oil buds are releasing their oil, and there is a lot of oil on the outside of a bud in very small wells, about 600 of them. That oil will turn into a vapor along with the steam and get carried out here. It comes down here it's steam, and as it comes down it starts turning into a liquid. It comes into this water bath in a spiral which condenses the steam into a liquid again, and it will start coming out here in a few minutes. To cool it, most people running a still will put cold water in, and that cold water will go either out into the yard, or they'll have a bucket where they pump up water and then the water comes around and back into the bucket. I did that for a while. It got a little warm towards the end. As this water gets hotter, it gets harder to turn the distillate back into a liquid. So I installed a car radiator and a fan just so that I can keep the water moving between the two to cool it. It's just keeping... You don't actually want freezing cold water in here because it would turn the steam back into a liquid too suddenly, and it can damage the oil. So you want it warm, but not hot. And the closer you get to boiling, the less efficient it's going to be in doing that. The worst thing would be if this cooling source turned hot, you would have a lot of your oil escaping as vapor as it came out, which obviously is a loss of product. So 6.5 hours boiling, this water level will go down to nearly to the bottom of this site, and we'll turn it off when we're not seeing a lot of oil dripping out the side. A lot of distillers go into a vessel and then drain the water off, and that's a perfectly efficient way to do it. Our device simply separates on the fly. So from this point, I always tell people it's a 6.5 hour process. From this point, it's about 4.5 hours, maybe 5. And it will look exactly the same when it comes out, just without color. First oil out of here, when the body of the lavender gets up to temperature, I guess we'll get a very small amount first coming from the edges where it will heat up very quickly. The oil will really start to flow probably in 2 hours, an hour and a half to 2 hours, when the middle starts getting up to temperature and it starts releasing the rest of the oil. Our neighbors have a smaller still, but it's propane powered, so they can get through distillation a whole lot faster because they can apply more heat to produce more steam. Truthfully, I kind of like the fact that it takes time. I'm not in a hurry. I'd like to get 2 runs done each day because we put most of our field through this process. And at the end of the season, we will put dried lavender through. Dried lavender, I think the oil is very similar. The hydrosol is not similar at all. It tastes, well, it smells a little flatter, and it doesn't have the chlorophyll content. So we prefer to do it this way. It's a non-pressure process, so I'm not quite sure why the makers decided to put this very heavy clamp on there. No pressure builds up during the distillation process because it's always vented through the condenser. So on each run of the still, we will get about 50 to 70 mil of oil, and each of the bottles are this big. I think in fluid ounces, that's 0.35 fluid ounces. So it's really not a huge amount per plant. Hydrosol doesn't smell like lavender. It's its own smell. There is a lot more chlorophyll in there. There's all sorts of compounds that you don't find in the oil. The difference between our copper still and a stainless steel still is very little. The stainless steel is non-reactive, whereas copper is very reactive with essential oil. Sometimes, if you've got a full stainless steel setup, you'll get a batch of oil that smells very off. And the way to fix that is to put the oil into a copper bowl, swill it around for a few minutes, put it back in the bottle, it will smell just fine. So it's a reaction between the copper and the oil. We have that reaction going constantly. When you use copper, you get a buildup on the inside of both the alembic and also the cooling snake inside this. So we have to clean it out. We're using a fairly weak citric solution. You just make it up, pour it in, get it nice and clean and flush it a few times. But they're not difficult to keep, they're not difficult to use. And I really think if you're a lavender farm without a still, then you're missing out.
Lavender oil is extracted through a steam extraction process. We have this boiler assembly here. We connect it to the cooling or condensing side of the process with a copper pipe here. And we boil water, we steam, the steam rises through a column of lavender that sits inside here and travels through a pipe that connects, like I said, to this unit here, the cooling side, which has the copper coils inside of it, like you'd see in any still and anywhere else. And it condenses the vapor, the water vapor and the oil back into a liquid, travels through the rest of the coils and drips out into our separating flask here. We use well water in our boiler here. It's filtered, highly filtered, so it doesn't have any solids in it, but basically just good pure well water. Another important part of the still is we run this at absolutely zero pressure. We have a gauge on the back side over here to tell us what the pressure is at the boiler end of this. And then we also have a gauge up here which tells us the pressure when it's being released into the condensing unit. These two never really read anything. This one never reads anything above 0. The one at the back here will run maybe 1/10 of a PSI or maybe 2/10 at the very most. And that's kind of the basics of the process. The stainless steel is efficient because well, I like it a lot because it's very efficient. Seals really well. It doesn't impart any metallic flavors or anything. It's whenever you're heating up metals, you'll have some sort of interactions with the flame, and stainless is ideal, just doesn't impart any metallic qualities at all. However, from here through the rest of the whole process, it is copper, and it turns out copper is actually very important to the process of distilling because it removes the sulfurous compounds of the essential oil. So from here through here and all the way through till here, through the coils, it is copper, and that's enough copper to accomplish the removal of the sulfur compounds. Place them towards the front here. That gives you the most leverage, makes it easiest to cut, and just a nice simple little cut. And that's why you're holding onto this, because this is what goes in the still. So again, the extraction of lavender oil, essential oil, is done through a steam extraction process. So we have water boiling in this tank down here. We're going to set the cylinder of lavender, just lavender flower tops, minimize the amount of stems that are going to go into this portion of the cylinder right here. Then we're going to steam it. You already see the water's boiling, steam's coming out. We're going to connect the steamer with the condensing side of this once we get the lavender inside the cylinder here. So open this up, make sure this is nice and clean so it seals well. Drop the cylinder of lavender flowers in here. Seal it up. Then we'll connect the boiler side of the still with the condensing side of the still with this copper pipe. And again, copper is very important to the distillation process because it removes the sulfurous compounds of the essential oil. So it's something that's actually very, very helpful to the quality of the oil. Just put those together. Cinch it down just a little bit so it doesn't leak. So now the steam is starting to rise through this cylinder, this column of lavender flower tops, and is right about, it's going to start getting pretty hot, so it's right about right here right now. Just a couple more minutes, it'll be all the way into the cooling coils inside this condensing cylinder, and then it'll condense back into a liquid. We'll have two components there obviously the steamed water is going to condense back into distilled water, which is actually impregnated with some of the essence of the lavender. It's a floral water. It's called a hydrolat. It's called a lavender water. It's called hydrosol. That's typically what we call it, is lavender hydrosol. So you get a lot of hydrosol right now, and the oil also condensing, and then they flow into this separating flask here. It's called a Florentine flask, and it will collect both the distilled water, the hydrosol, and the oil. The oil being lighter will rise to the top, and then we just separate them as at the end to remove, so as not to remove just the water from the oil. We're going to generate roughly a gallon of hydrosol. Well, roughly, and in terms of how much oil, everybody always asks, how much do you get out of a batch? It always depends on the variety of the lavender, as well as the point at which the lavender is harvested, and the year, depending on the season and how the lavender grew that year. So we can never really predict how much we're going to get out of each batch, but we generally run around a half a cup or so, 4 ounces, around 120 mils to a gallon of the hydrosol. So now the steam is running through here. This is all very, very hot, running into our cooling tower, filled with water that we're piping in cold water from the well and siphoning off the hot water to keep this as cool as possible so that we don't cook the oil any longer than we have to. It just drains right back in, converts right back down into a liquid. It runs through the coils and drips out as it is right now, right into the separating flask. In just a couple of minutes, you should be able to see a layer of oil forming on the top. It'll be an amber color as opposed to the clear hydrosol. When it comes out, it's perfectly cool. It's back to room temperature. So it's not like it's hot or anything like that. There's a little that amber layer on that line there on the top of the liquid here is the essential oil. This is the hydrosol. We'll wait till it fills up to about here, then we'll start draining off hydrosol as it's generated. We're going to, like I said, we're going to produce roughly a gallon of hydrosol. This is just a 2-liter vessel here, so we'll have to drain off along the way just so it doesn't overflow. We save the hydrosol, we use the hydrosol in some cosmetic preparations, and it's got a pH of roughly 6.5, so it's identical to your face. It's a great facial toner. Smells great. Used in spray mists to make linen smell good, pet beds, a room freshener, all kinds of good uses. This will take roughly 45 minutes or so. We found through repeated batches, around 45 minutes to an hour. We generally run maybe an hour just to get the most oil that you can get without just burning propane for no good reason. You could probably run it for 2 hours and still get more oil, but diminishing returns after around an hour. So
we've seen them on multiple stories where 5 guys and a tire filled with concrete are lowered onto the lavender and they force it down as hard as they can. But in truth, if you pack it too tightly, you're going to get a lower yield. And we have definitely done that in the past. Just put too much material in, you don't get the oil out. So lightening up on the material gives you more oil. It's got to be a better deal. Knowing the difference is just a feel. I'm sure that I could come up with a metric on that, and I'm sure it would be tough. But then you would probably try a different size still, and that metric would have to change. I believe in treating the plant with respect because you're going to get a better product if you don't cram it into garbage cans and stand on it so that you can make fewer trips down with the tractor. You start bruising the plant, something's got to give, something's got to be different. I'm not saying necessarily worse, but probably. So we treat it with respect. We pick it in slightly bigger bundles when it's going in the when we know it's going in the still, but they're down and in the still within a couple of hours. So these top bundles I picked an hour ago. I will get this cleaned out, get it cooled down, they'll be ready to go in the next run. So it's respect, yeah, I guess, but it's more about just doing a job well, doing it in a pleasant environment rather than industrialization and packing in as much as you possibly can. And we've seen that. We've seen machine harvesting running into machine distillation in minutes, and we decided we didn't want to do it that way. So that's why we're much smaller scale. And we'll never have that 250 acres of lavender that we need our harvester for. It's just not on the books. Lots of people have only smelled French lavender oil. So when you turn them onto English lavender oil, they're very surprised. It's more expensive, but mostly people think it's worth it because it's a more complex and more useful oil. All right, so we finished. We have, in our sight line here, we have a small amount of oil on top of the remaining water. Always happens because of reflux during the process where the oil comes up, cools at the top, and runs back down. A very small amount of water will come in through this port. Also, just the steam entering containing oil. So you can see a very small amount of oil on there, and sadly that's lost because we have no way to recover it. So to take off the top, in this particular still, the only thing I have to undo properly is this will come off with these thumb screws. And we're left with steaming lavender. Down, because that's rather warm. Whew. And that's quite a pungent smell. The lavender has lost its color, so it really hasn't moved during the process. But it is a very unusual smell. It's nice, but I'm not sure that you could bottle it. The profile changes hugely. I know that the green note that fresh oil has disperses quite quickly. I'm told that you can sell lavender after 3 months because the overall smell loses the greenness, comes up in the floral notes. And I think the whole waiting a year thing is more due to the fact that in 3 months it'll be Christmas, in 6 months it'll be snow on the ground and it'll be wet out. So really, by the time we get to sell it again, a year will have gone by. I would sell after 3 months, definitely. I've had people actually request fresh oil from the still because they prefer that green note. I hope they use it quite quickly because it's going to go away. It could just be the chlorophyll. But there is evidence that the esters that make up the floral smell are changed in the distillation process. And I just wonder if what we're seeing is a reconstitution of those damaged esters over the time. And what we got from that run, so it was in there for 6 hours, and we achieved about 75 mil. So I'd consider that a very, very good run. And we just have to wait 1 year before we can use it. As soon as that's cooled down, I will change the water in here, and then we'll be able to run again with the next batch. We leave all of our oil in these bottles. They're old bottles. We get them from wherever we see them. It's very easy to find stoppers. It's very easy to find bottles. Finding stoppers that match bottles, that's tougher because they're not usually kept together for so long. And they're all so very different in their sizing.
Okay, so now that we're done distilling, there's still a lot of hydrosol left in the flask. This top layer up here, this rather amber golden color, is the oil. So from basically a full garden cart of lavender stalks and trimming them down into just the stems, the flower tops that we put in the still, which holds roughly a cubic foot of lavender flowers, we've resulted in this much oil here. So, but it's wonderful. It's pure, it's exactly, because of the way this farm operates, we harvest everything by hand, so we don't get a lot of weeds, dirt, and other stems and things in our oil. It's all very, very pure. So what we're going to do now is just drain the remaining portion of this hydrosol, which smells wonderful. Again, it's great in certain cosmetic applications and has a pH identical to your face, so it smells great. Take this down further, get the oil just right about down in here, then we'll do a very fine separation of the two at the very end here. As this drains down to the flask, it speeds up because the container gets smaller, so we got to slow it down here. You can also see there's a little bit of a dark layer at the very bottom of the oil. That's always some resins that get through the process, or not seeds, maybe little dirt, pollen, anything like that. But it's nice that it settles to the bottom. We're going to not only separate out, make sure we don't have any water in our oil, but we'll get rid of this fraction here of the oil as well, which has a little bit of, like I say, dirt, pollen, plant parts. It's hard to say. Okay, so that's all the hydrosol. So we generated through this distillation, almost about a little over 5 quarts of hydrosol. And And now let's trade this out, and I'm just going to carefully allow that sediment that we don't want to save, even though it is mixed with some oil, get that through the funnel here, right about there. Kind of make the barn smell good by tossing that. And clean this out. So what's left now in the flask is 100% pure lavender oil. So for all the work and all the effort of harvesting and distilling, we're going to drain this off now. We'll see what our yield is. But we got just right around 80 mils on this particular batch. Now it's time to smell. Wonderful. So, you guys have your hydrosol bottles. Let's fill you up with. Hold on to your oil. Okay, step right up. Who wants to fill their bottle here?
So one of the most important things with maintaining a healthy lavender field is the attention you pay to it in the fall. So you want to be able to get to the plants before the first frost. So typically in mid to late October, we're going to come out here. All this will be harvested by then. We're just going to have the plants that have, we've already harvested the flowers off of, but they need an extra trimming. So we're going to take those plants and trim them down to about 2 inches above where the little woody part of the stem is. And we'll come out here with some electric trimmers and just trim every one of these bushes. So at the end of October, early part of November, all this field will just be these very small little mounds of lavender. And that is a very critical part because that will encourage the plants, encourage the root growth, and it encourages the plants to grow out and up instead of just straight up like this. That's why if you look around this field, the plants are beautifully full and robust.
In order to keep your lavender plants really compact, we prune twice a year. If you don't prune, they can, after a year or two, get really leggy. And if you like that look, that's fine, because they're just a beautiful plant. But if you really want a compact growth, then you prune it twice a year. And so this still has a lot of flowers on it, but I'm going to cut it back so that we can get some new growth for propagating. Okay, so we use the shears if we're going to do really a big cutting, and you're just cutting back, not the old growth. You don't want the old, cut back the old. You're cutting back maybe about 2 inches, thereabouts, above the old stems. So you'll see that some of the stems just are standing straight up, and the new growth is just below it. It'll take at least 2 to 3 weeks for the new growth to come up, and that's because we will water and fertilize it to get new growth going. But you can see where the plant is much more compact like this. And then when the plants grow this winter, come February, March, we'll come out and do a very light pruning, just to keep it. You want the growth down at the bottom of the plant, and so by doing this, you're stimulating that, opening it up and letting it grow down there, giving you that compact look.
For pruning lavender, the first thing we encourage people to do is to rake over the top of the lavender, just briefly like this. And this has no real effect on the lavender except the fact that for the pruner, it tells you that there's no yellow jackets or bees or anything in the area, and therefore it lessens the likelihood that you're going to get stung. As far as pruning is concerned, you just grab a handful of it, just reach in any place, and just grab a handful and you cut off a little, clip it at a little at a time. And if this seems a little bit slow for the entire garden, this is the way we do it. It allows us to be more on a one-on-one with each plant so that we don't make any mistakes. On this particular plant here, we have a tuft here. We have a tuft in here to where we're not able to prune to the bowl site, even side like I have on this side right here. So we've had to just prune each little mountaintop of lavender there to maintain the same effect as not getting into the wood, but still getting it ready for the fall and next spring. Here in Southern Oregon, we have had in the past, we've come in the spring to check the plants and found that the dead stuff back here started to mildew, and then we've had to go in and do serious pruning on it to preserve the plant. When we get down to the bottom, to the ground level of the plant, we will plant it. We'll get down to about 1 foot or 6 inches above the ground level. And in this particular case, since we have a walkway here, we'll prune it straight down because the plant will start invading the walkway to allow an air circulation under the plant during the winter. There is a good chance that if we don't maintain this airway underneath here and get down underneath this, that with the winter rains and snow and spring rains, that it will mildew underneath here and then that will also kill that area of the plant.
Propagating lavenders is very simple. The first few times you do it, you might not get it right, but what you have to do is remember to just do it again, because once you get it down, you can have, this is a finished flat. We get a couple hundred in a flat. That's from only probably half of one plant, even less maybe. So you can really turn them out. And what we use is, and the times that we've had people say they've had problems propagating, it always comes down to the medium that they used. Some people dig the soil up, some people take compost, some perlite, straight perlite. It's porous, it works really well for the cuttings, for the rooting. We use these flats. You can use anything, just so long as there's drainage. And the reason for this is that for us, we can tell when these plants, once the plants start, after you've taken the cuttings, which we'll go through, once you start seeing growth, either flowers or new growth on top, like this has new growth here, you know your roots have started. And another way to do it, and even more accurate, is, I don't know if you can see, but those are the roots that are coming out of the bottom of the plant. Those are ready to pot. Okay, and in order to take the cuttings, you don't want to take any of the old wood, like down here where you see it's already brown and very thick. You're going to take the fresh, new cutting material, new growth. You will cut, and then you will, some people pull it off. I think the best thing to do is to cut the leaves off. You don't want to tear into your stem and set up anything that could infect the plant. So you cut the leaves off. You want to make sure you have cut back at least on 3 or 4 nodes. That's where the roots are going to come out. Okay, once you take your cuttings, then you will make an incision in your perlite. Make sure the perlite is moist, really moist, and well packed. Then you take the knife and you cut in. And this, all where you've taken the leaves off, are what you want in the soil, right up to where it's starting to grow. So you're placing that in there. I don't know if you can see, I've got them spaced apart an inch or so. And then you really pack these down. You take your fingers and you really press them down so that they're not wavering. After you've done your row, then you water this down really well. And then this stays out of the sun for the first day or so. If it's really hot, you want to make sure that they're not exposed to that kind of direct sun or high winds. And then they can be uncovered. So this is a finished flat. This one was done probably 2 weeks ago. And you can see that there's no roots. Whoops, that's not supposed to be there. I think that was left over. There's no root showing and won't be for at least another, I would guess, 3 to 4 weeks. And once the roots are showing, you don't have to dig them, pot them right away, but we do. We pot them as soon as we see there's new growth. We use just a little razor blade knife. You can see that the roots are indeed ready for potting. I'm sticking this back in because I'm not going to pot it right now. So once you see the roots coming, once you see either flowers or new green growth, then it's time. And usually from a cutting, again, it depends on the time of year that you take the cutting. These were probably taken maybe June, early June. This kind of heat, they're ready in a month, 6 weeks. And in the fall, it's a little bit slower. Winter, we don't do cuttings. We probably do cuttings right up until September. And then we start again in maybe March. So you have a long period in which you can do it. And then, so we use the little razor blade and then the little clippers to take the cutting to start the propagation.
So these, they're harvesting, bundling, and hooking on with paper clips to dry them, and then we'll strip the buds off, and they use them in sachets.
Oh, okay.
And we sell the lavender buds.
Okay, so once we've harvested our aromatic lavender, we've harvested it, put it in bundles, and this time we've wrapped an elastic around it so it'll stay bundled. We bring it into the barn here, and we hang it on these chains for typically 3 to 5 days, depending how warm it is. We want to make sure the buds are really dried out by the time we're going to strip them, because they'll just come off beautifully and clean then.
I just like the plants. The plants are easy to care for. It's continual, which is one reason why I came to the garden. I get bored if I have to just take care of one little plant all along. In here, there's always work to do.
The pure enthusiasm.
Yeah.
It's been really very rewarding.
The whole garden is my favorite.